Good afternoon, friends. I'm happy to introduce the next speaker. He has been a childhood hero for me, okay? And so I'm kind of a little emotional at this moment of time to have him here. I'm truly, truly honored to have you, MJ, at our event. And I wanted to put the context in which we've invited you. There's been a change of government. The government came in with a lot of expectations. Now, the question on uppermost on people's minds is, under Modi, will India live up to its full potential? And I hope your address can deal with some of these concerns. So I'm happy to invite you. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give MJ a very, very warm welcome. Okay? Okay. MJ belongs to the old school. He thinks that sirf Delhi walon ke paas dil nahi hai. Bombay is made of heartless mercenaries. Let's put that myth to rest today. Let's give him a bigger welcome. Come.
Thank you very much indeed, Prem. I wish your introductions wouldn't age me immediately. If I'm your childhood friend, a childhood hero, I must be really getting along. I know the question that is uppermost in the minds, on your minds this evening. You have also described Bombay as heartless mercenary. In that case, I'm particularly pleased that I started my career in Bombay. And 6 years of learning how to work in Bombay certainly helped me to create a future in Calcutta, which in some respects still hasn't learned how to work. If you want to understand the present government, or more specifically, the present Prime Minister's economic objectives, and he's a pragmatic man. He's an objectives-driven man. He's a realist. He shapes policy and the path forward in very much like with a private sector mind. He believes in deliverables. But of course, in order to believe in deliverables, you have to know what you want. Where do you want to reach and what do you want? If you want to understand precisely what his objective is at the end of his first term, or as long as he can remain Prime Minister, you have to actually go back to the very first speech he made in Parliament. And that speech, I remember I was not in Parliament then. I am now, but I wasn't in Parliament then. And I was watching that speech on television. And I remember very clearly the manner in which even people from our side of the house winced, literally winced, the moment he made this statement. He said, in essence, that the age of poverty alleviation is over. Now, it seems almost unbelievable that a Prime Minister of India can stand up and say that the age of poverty alleviation is over. But then came this follow-up sentence, which is actually critical. He said the age of poverty elimination has begun. I understand that when I mentioned the word poverty, basically there must be about 1,000 internal yawns. Haven't we heard this word before? Let me rephrase it. Put it back into the context in which he also sees. Roughly 600 million Indians at this particular moment, about 600 million Indians at this particular moment are consumers only of agricultural products. If you add cotton spun cloth to the mix of which is also an agricultural product, you will see that they don't really live beyond the agricultural produce of India. The challenge, therefore, is how to convert this 600 million into a consuming market for both industrial products as well as modern services. How do you create a new markets in India? Not necessarily by taking manufacturing down to the people. You also have to take the base up towards manufacturing. And if you don't marry the two and find an even balance at which they can meet each other, one will keep on chasing the other, which has been really the story of the last 6-7 decades. It isn't as if we haven't made progress. Of course we've made progress. But the question is this. In 1950, and this links up also with his decision to change the Planning Commission, then change the name and therefore the objectives of the Planning Commission. If you want to understand that, here is, I offer a syndrome. In 1950, when the Planning Commission was first set up to become the intellectual as well as actually the investment engine of Indian growth, both the intellectual as well as the investment engine of Indian growth. When the Planning Commission was set up, it was estimated that about 60 to 65% of India lived below the poverty line. The poverty line, as you know, is a terribly nebulous line in our country, and below the poverty line is a world which you do not know. It is difficult to even imagine it, trust me. But about 60 to 65 people. Now, sometimes, when you get onto this subject, you don't know where to begin. But let me at least briefly give you some background to what 1947 and 1950 was, very briefly. Remember one thing. Nobody comes to conquer a poor country. The cost of conquest must be worth the returns. No one. Nobody was interested in the deserts of Arabia or the deserts of Persia or the deserts of Iraq until oil was found. The reason why India was an attractive destination for armies was because India was a wealthy country. And basically because the Ganga-Jamuna agrarian belt was a source of great wealth. It was that wealth which ended up, a part of which ended up in temples, part of it ended up in the imperial houses, and part of it ended up for the welfare of the people. So, statistics as they have begun to be recorded in a modern parlance. The first statistic was 1750. In 1750, India produced 24% of the world manufacturing output. That means one good out of every 4 was produced. Now listen, I haven't picked this figure up from the internet, which is often a huge source of junk. Or perhaps worse, from the propaganda department of the government of India. It's from Paul Kennedy's book, The Rise and Fall of Nations. And this wealth is very traditional. I'm at this moment on the way here reading a book on Jerusalem. It's a classic. Right? And it says that the gold that the Queen of Sheba, which is actually the Queen of Saba, took to Solomon's and his famous temple, that gold was from India. So India has been a traditional source of wealth. British imperialism changed the nature of the Indian economy in very fundamental ways and created severe impoverishment for the first time, and that impoverishment was most visible in the sequence of famines. First great famine, 1765 to 1770, 1778, in which 1/3 of Bengal had a population of 30 million at the time, the whole of British Bengal, 1/3 died. And when they left behind 4 million dead in the same Bengal. Anyway, when you hear talk about, the British having created modern India, please junk it as soon as you can. Between 1900 and 1950, India's rate of growth was 1% or less. Just 1% or less. If you want to understand colonization, just remember, by 1950, India had become 1.8% or 2% of world manufacturing output, and Britain, which in 1750 was 2%, had become 24%. Anyway, the point is that we can't create a future by blaming Britain. What happened, and that was it. We can't change it, but we can create a future for ourselves. So what was the challenge? The challenge was how to turn India into a modern, industrialized, but a prosperous nation. In the last figures given by the Rangarajan report to Dr. Manmohan Singh, a few months before he demitted office, were given, that figure had come down to 30%. According to the official statistics, maybe 30%, maybe 35%, doesn't matter. Now, if you were like you and me, we have had 3 meals and haven't had a 4th only because the doctor has told us not to have 4 meals a day. Right? We might sit back and congratulate ourselves. Dekho sahab, 60% tha, humne 30 kar diya. The question that India is asking is quite different. If it took 70 years to bring the figure down from 65 to 30, is it going to take another 70 years to take the figure down from 30 to 0? Will India's young, not the young who get jobs in your companies, the ones who are waiting there, will India's young wait that long? No longer. No longer. You're looking at serious disturbance, serious violence, serious chaos, if we cannot address this problem of meeting their aspirations within the next decade. And I don't believe we have more than a decade. I really don't. So the challenge before us is how do we solve this basic problem to keep our nation a stable nation? Now, how are we going to do it? It's very easy to raise the question. The answer, it's a common sense answer, and certainly the answer is at the root of the Prime Minister's vision of how to go about solving this problem. The answer is jobs. The answer is not just an endless and continuing policy of handouts. When you have such severe poverty, you have to have positive discrimination. Forget it, there is no it can't be stopped. But that's not a solution. The solution to a cancer cannot be Band-Aid. Therefore, what is the solution? The solution is jobs. Now, who is going to provide the jobs? The traditional sources of jobs around which our youth went was jobs in government. The whole of the CPM, for example, the Marxist movement, was created around jobs in government, expanding the state till it became a bloated entity unable to waddle, let alone walk or run. The state is not going to give you any more jobs. It's over. In fact, as a side issue, right, the whole battles for reservations is becoming increasingly meaningless because there's no jobs out there, so what are you reserving? Second, which was the great Nehruvian model, can the public sector provide jobs? The public sector at one point did, and we must honor that. There was Durgapur, there was, the whole of Bhilai, and You can name at least as a dozen cities which were turned out of public sector investment. But today, can you turn the public sector into anything credible? Yes, not all public sector is bad. There are some which function quite well. But you've got to be very foolish to believe that the public sector is your answer. So, it's the old model of a solution. If everything else has failed, what is left? The private sector. It is only by releasing the entrepreneurial skills of the private sector is where you are going to find the job creation opportunities. But here, let me tell you, the problem in perception, and not only problem in perception, the problem in reality. And this, when you say sometimes, I'm not cynical about Bombay, but I only wish that Bombay would understand that Bombay cannot survive without India. It is India which is the basis of Bombay's success rather than the other way around. So what is? The private sector is not only the companies that have the financial headquarters and the financial engines based in the mechanics of Bombay. There is a huge world of opportunity lying, and in fact, I offer, and I think at some point we will have to create a new term for it. The state sector, the private sector, and perhaps the new term, the self sector. The self sector, where a whole new world of employment is going to come through turning the self, individuals into businesses, and individuals into self-employed business opportunities. Never forget that the largest number of jobs in this country are already coming from the self sector. What do we call them? Housemaids, or people who work in homes. They are essentially self-employed. It's an unregulated sector. In very many senses, it's an unprotected sector. I don't want to, it's a public forum, so I don't want to, get into any controversies. But every day's headlines tell you that the lack of regulation in that sector leads to crime. It's an unprotected sector, but it is a sector that emerges out of necessity. The largest migrations of labor that are taking place across the country are not migrations which are induced by regulated businesses. They are migrations which are from Bihar or now from Odisha, from wherever, which are coming in, searching for jobs and for opportunity. It is that sector, how we can make that into an economically empowered sector, so that that sector becomes the major consuming sectors of India. If those 600 million, the famous matchstick metaphor, if they buy one matchstick each every day, some matchbox manufacturer is going to become a multi-billionaire. So if you see the government's policy lines, they are working on two parallels. Two lines which are working on parallels. And if I may be bold enough to say, one line is the conventional line formulated through the finance minister, who is doing a very sincere and dedicated job of it. One is working through the finance sector, through the conventional tramlines of the economy, through the Reserve Bank and the banking sector, through the budgets. But there is a second economic policy which is being shaped directly by the Prime Minister. That economic policy and that economy that is being created, that is being done with he himself becoming the official or unofficial minister in charge of that. Now, what is that economy? At the root of it is the economic empowerment of people. He has turned, the statistics are phenomenal. 17 crores, 170 million new bank accounts have been opened in the Jan Dhan Yojana. Open to people who never dreamt that they could enter a bank, let alone having a bank account. Now, I have been on debates, I've been on these things, and sometimes I get angry at not just the cynicism that is so inbuilt into our thinking. Very intelligent person representing the JDU on television in front of that great hero of decibel levels, Arnab Goswami, saying, ha, ha, ha. No, that's not Arnab, huh? That's the other guy. Ha, ha, ha. 40% don't have any money in that bank account. What kind of a yojana is this? That really angered me. I said, you don't get it, do you? You don't get it. This is the first scheme that has ever been created for those without money. Which means that if they don't have money today, they will have it tomorrow. And when they get it tomorrow, the direct benefits, there will be no middleman. If they have 100 rupees surplus, that 100 rupees will not go under the pillow. It will not be vulnerable to anybody wanting to convert that into beira. It is the first serious challenge to the chit fund. Can't you see these things? Why would the poor give the money to a chit fund? Is this the right forum to say this? Sahara Hotel? But this is the first serious challenge. Why would the poor go to a chit fund? Because they have nowhere else to go. Along with this, for the first time, already 22,000 crores have entered the banking system through Jan Dhan Yojana. People forget that. And it is going to go up to 40,000 crores. Then, the social security net, for the first time, along with financial empowerment, comes a social security net, which becomes a huge psychological reassurance. 12 crore people have joined the insurance schemes. 12 rupees. And look at the manner in which it is being turned into a mass movement through Rakhi, through Raksha Bandhan Day, through Diwali. Turn it into a gift. And you have, the 5,000 rupees overdraft that you get through Jan Dhan. Do you know what the average level of debt for the poor is? It is around that. But so far for that, they have been paying 36%, 40%, 50%. And one of the most important schemes in this, which is the Mudra Bank. Please check the statistics of how much disbursement has already taken place. So there is a new economy which has been created. Maybe the Independence Day speech is too early. Maybe it's a holiday and nobody actually listens. And certainly the media doesn't report it the next day in any sense of how it's addressed. But look at the mass movement. It tells banks, the Prime Minister tells banks, there are 100 public sector banks, 125,000, no, even private sector banks, all banks. There are 125,000 branches. He said if each branch just makes an effort. No, I know this is not going to happen, but even if 10% happens, if each branch makes an effort to provide a business opportunity worth between 50,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees to 2 lakh rupees, not a great sum. Your non-performing asset owners would probably give that as a daily tip. All those chaps who've stolen the money of the country. Just give that. To who? One Dalit, one woman, one tribal. What will it do? 5 chickens. A goat. These are business models. These are business models that go down right to where the problem is. There will never be a conference in a 5-star hotel for this business. But they don't need it. They get the message. And I tell you, this is happening. This is the real new economy that is being created. And out of that is going to emerge. Out of that is going to emerge the new consumer. Look, I'll tell you something. How much more time do we have? 5 minutes. I think I'm happier with that. I will make a prediction that you can hold me up to. I won't leave my phone number with any of you, so if I go wrong, you won't have anyone to curse. But I have a very strong sense, I've just come from Bihar, that our party is going to win. And I'll tell you why. I'm half my family, I know I was born in Calcutta, but my grandfather's side, my father's side is really from Bihar, settled in the jute mill industry. And I've been covering Bihar for longer years than I can remember. For the first time, I'm seeing something which really thrills me. The young, I'm not so sure about the middle-aged and the old, but the young are no longer voting on the basis of sentiment, and certainly not sectarian sentiment. They're voting on the basis of logic. Now, what is the logic? The logic is this. What is our objective? Development. Everybody agrees. हाँ sir, ठीक है. विकास, विकास, विकास. सबके लिए विकास, ठीक है. How is विकास going to come? Good government. How is good government going to come? With stability. You can't have an unstable government deliver good government. You can't have an unstable company producing profits. It just doesn't happen. Who of the two can provide? No election is between Lord Ram and Lord Krishna. Elections are between available choices. So who can provide stability?